Bonjour à tous. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of our participants, wherever you may be in Canada or across the globe. My name is David Wheeler, and I am the Sustainability Advisor to Canadian Colleges for a Resilient Recovery, and also to Mohawk College, which we're delighted to say is the host for today's webinar, which is Rebuild, Supporting the Transformation to Zero Carbon Buildings. This is the third in our series of webinars, and there will be more in the future, which set out what we think are exciting areas for the green or resilient recovery, where there is lots of potential for green jobs for young and old learners in the college and CEGEP and polytechnic system, to make a real difference to Canada's building back better post-pandemic. So C2R2 is a coalition of colleges, CEGEPs and polytechnics and institutes across the country from coast to coast to coast, who've come together to advance the case for a resilient recovery, following up on the recommendations of the National Task Force for a Resilient Recovery for Canada. So we're very excited to be bringing you this webinar. If you want to know more about Canadian Colleges for Resilient Recovery, please visit our website, which is www.resilientcolleges.ca, where you can learn about the founding partners of the initiative from coast to coast to coast, and also the initiatives that we're taking in training and education, in demonstration projects for a low carbon economy, and of course research and development for a low carbon economy, which is done by many, many institutions across the country in concert with local business and industry partners. So today, as I mentioned, the seminar is being presented by Mohawk College, and we have a fantastic team behind the scenes who brought this together. Adrienne from Mohawk College and her colleagues Amy and Sam and Joanne. So thank you to all of you for your work in bringing this together. We have a fantastic turnout today. So many, many people attending this webinar. Thank you for your efforts there. Also, I want to mention that we have signing for this event done by Sarah and Erin. So thank you to Sarah and Erin, and you can see their smiling faces and their expert signing happening in front of us. So at this point, I would like to introduce President Ron McCurley from Mohawk College to say a few words. And Ron has been the driving force really between building the coalition for C2R2 and doing outreach with government ministers and their staffs and so on. So we're very, very appreciative of the leadership that Ron has shown throughout this initiative for Canadian Colleges for Resilient Recovery. And I can think of no one better placed to open up this event than Ron. And so over to you, Ron, for your introductory remarks.
Well, thank you very much, David, and thank you for facilitating today's session. I'd like to say hello and welcome to today's webinar. Very excited about the Canadian Colleges for Resilient Recovery Coalition, also known as C2R2, and what this means for our Building Back Better national initiative. C2R2 is confident that colleges, CEGEPs, institutes, and polytechnics across Canada can train at least 50,000 Canadians to develop the specialized skills required to work in growth areas for a low carbon economy and achieve the goals outlined in the federal budget. Canada's buildings are a leading contributor to climate change. As a leader in building excellence, Mohawk College understands the need to explore how we train our workforce to build better and support tremendous growth in construction, skilled trades, and engineering. Mohawk College is home to our region's first zero carbon institutional building and one of the largest net zero buildings in Canada. Opened in 2018, we've already seen how technologies evolve and are changing the way we build. Similar to you, I look forward to hearing from our expert panelists today as they explore the transformation to zero carbon buildings in Canada. So thank you to everyone for tuning in today. I'd like to now take a moment to acknowledge the 215 children whose remains were discovered on the grounds of the Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia last week. We hold in our hearts these children, their families, and their communities. We acknowledge and honor the experiences of all survivors of residential schools and their families and Indigenous communities who are coping with the news in this discovery. This news serves to remind us that Indigenous communities continue to be re-traumatized by the historic wrongs and that we need to continue to acknowledge and address these wrongs. Much work needs to be done, and C2R2, Mohawk College, and all of the other founding members of the coalition are committed to being active partners in reconciliation with Indigenous communities. Well, today we have the opportunity to virtually bring together folks from across the country. Mohawk College and the land in which I currently live on is situated on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabeg nations, within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, and is currently home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. The actions of the Canadian Colleges for Resilient Recovery prioritize our commitments to truth and reconciliation, inclusivity, equity, and access. We're committed to providing a platform for the voices of community, industry, employers, and students through the work that we do. As such, I'd like to welcome Aria Delamonte, who just recently finished her final semester in the Recreation Therapy program at Mohawk College. Aria is part of the Six Nations Turtle Clan and a sustainability student leader at Mohawk. We've invited her today to say a few words. Welcome, Aria, and congratulations on finishing your program.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Ron. So as stated, I am a recent grad of the Recreation Therapy program at Mohawk College. I've spent a lot of my time at Mohawk, not only learning from my program, but volunteering pretty much wherever I got the chance, from working with the Indigenous Education and Student Services Center to sorry about that, where I was an advocate for Indigenous students for the MSA Student Committee, to helping launch the community garden on campus, to growing as a student leader through Mohawk College's Leadership Academy. I can safely say that the work being done here has been extremely beneficial to the community member and advocate that I am today. Growing up on reserve meant that I had the opportunity to learn and be immersed in my culture. When I got to Mohawk, I was blown away by the opportunities that allowed me to connect with the land and my culture through the supports offered by the college's sustainability department, the community garden, and the Indigenous Education and Student Services Center. Throughout my college career, I was able to reach my educational and my sustainability goals and learn and be immersed in my culture. Sorry, I just lost my I engaged in my culture and teachings because of the pathways carved out by those before me. I was able to learn and grow in a healthy and supported environment. Being an urban Indigenous woman today can be tricky to navigate at times, but I am impressed by the work of the C2R2 Coalition and the work that they are doing to provide valuable information, education, and opportunities for learners from all corners of Canada. The work that the C2R2 is doing to create equitable pathways to education for rural Indigenous communities through micro-credentials creates a brighter future for many individuals that might not have had the opportunity otherwise. Seeing underrepresented populations have the chance to be heard and included in initiatives like this is a big step forward, and one that means a lot to me. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to join today. And similar to many of you, I look forward to hearing from the panelists to learn how we can build a better tomorrow to support a low carbon future and ultimately protect our Mother Earth here on Turtle Island.
Well, thank you, Aria and Ron, for your opening remarks. Aria, those were very compelling words, and everything that C2R2 does, of course, is to support students like you and their future life opportunities. So it was wonderful to hear what you had to say, and I'm sure we'll hear much more from you in the future as an Indigenous woman leader with a sustainability passion. So I'm sure we'll be hearing much more from you as years go by, and we look forward to learning what you get up to and how your career blossoms from here, with, I'm sure, the ongoing support of Mohawk and all of its stakeholders. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our seminar. As Ron mentioned, buildings are a major source of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. And Mohawk has particular expertise in this topic, which is why it's hosting this particular webinar. But it's something around 12% of all Canada's GHGs relate directly to buildings. So there's a massive amount of work to do in retrofitting existing buildings, in redesigning new buildings, making sure that as much of our building stock, whether that's housing, domestic housing or institutional buildings, government buildings and so on, as much of that stock as possible has to be zero carbon going forward. And the good news is that of all topics highlighted in the recent federal budget, building retrofits and energy efficiency were really top of the list, and we can expect billions of dollars to flow into pursuing the goal of zero emissions buildings, and of course large amounts of money, hundreds of millions we hope, going into training for the skills and the aptitudes that will be required by graduates of colleges and CEGEPs and polytechnics to enter into fantastic careers in this whole area. So I'm very pleased to say we have a wonderful panel. We have Tony Cupido, who's the research chair in sustainable building technologies at Mohawk, and we'll be hearing from Tony in a little while. We also have Timo Cruz, who's assistant project manager, prefabrication and modular building at Ellis Don. Of course, Ellis Don is a company which is very well known for its commitment to green buildings, green infrastructure, helping municipalities and many other people responsible for infrastructure and buildings to get it right. So again, looking forward to hearing from Timo in a little while. And we have Dr. Alexandra Thompson, who is High Performance Buildings Program Leader at the National Research Council of Canada. And of course, the NRC is a leading player in many technologies that are important to the green economy, the future green economy for Canada. And Lexi leads a really important group within the NRC, which is highly relevant to our topic for today. And Lexi is also going to be our first speaker. So at this point, I would like to introduce Dr. Thompson, Lexi, to share with us her thoughts and perspectives on the challenge of greener building and what we need to do to ensure that we have the greenest possible housing stock and infrastructure and building stock in Canada. So Dr. Thompson, over to you.
Thank you, David. If you hear bleeping, it's my Teams that doesn't seem to want to turn off. So one of the problems of virtual working, I'm afraid. The presentation today I'm going to give predominantly talks about some of the work that we've been doing at NRC and where we see the future being for this low carbon built environment that we all hope to achieve in a relatively short time span. I've got a few slides, so I'll go through those and welcome any questions either during the presentation or after the presentation as was set out at the beginning. So the next slide, please. Okay, so NRC, for those of you that don't know, is the sort of the premier Canadian Science, Tech and Innovation R&D department of the federal government. Having said that, we work very closely with our excellent colleagues in NRCan and infrastructure and D&D and many other departments as well. So we really do work as a federal family to provide support for policy and providing academic knowledge that can feed back into the academic community as well. One of the things that's unique about NRC is that we really do work very closely with industry as well. And you can see in this slide here that we have over 1,000 R&D clients, we have very large revenues, and we also have a lot of funding that goes towards IRAP for the Industrial Research Assistance Program to enable small and medium enterprise to get new technologies into the marketplace and de-risked and accelerated to market. Just so that you know, we are also, as well as an R&D agency, we also are an asset owner, and we have over 179 buildings that we manage and own, and those are distributed in 22 locations. So in many respects, some of the challenges that industry is facing are ones that we ourselves are facing too. And as a research organization, we have an environmental research strategy. We do lots of R&D on diverse environmental solutions, and we are trying to green our buildings, but it is tough. So I think that whilst the government is setting these remarkable targets, we, I hope, can sort of empathize with what industry is going through in trying to green this space. So I think that if, just to sort of summarize my perspective on this, if we do want to reach the 2030 40 to 45% pan-Canadian framework target, we need to work smarter and faster as a country and as a collaborative, in a collaborative method. So next slide, please. So I think to address sort of the topic that we're talking about today, I think to achieve a low carbon built environment, we need to move beyond the operational carbon and energy efficiency conversation. Now, the work that we've been doing in the High Performance Buildings program, you can see that in the 2 yellow arrows here, really has addressed operational carbon. And we've done that through innovation, we've done that through codes and standards support, and we've done that through policy support and enabling good science behind procurement. But it's time now to move that conversation on and take the lessons learned from that and to talk about things like embodied carbon and start to actualize some of the research that's been going on in this space for, gosh, I don't know, 40 years, 50 years, I guess. I remember talking about embodied carbon during my master's in the late 90s in the UK. So it's been around for a long time. So how do we make this happen? And how do we really include renewables in that conversation as well, in ways that are standardized, in ways that are sort of optimized so they're not too labor intensive, and in ways that are coordinated. So I think that some of the terms that we're thinking about in this space are enabling standardized embodied carbon accounting. How do we optimize the energy grid? How do we incorporate different types of energy? How do we consider buildings now as grid interactive spaces rather than just users of energy? How do we start to advance building construction technologies and practices to embrace embodied carbon? And how do we now work towards using circular economy principles? And so these are the sort of the ways that we're now beginning to think about our R&D and the impact that R&D can have. We have been working with the building materials sector as well to develop a plan for how we can support a low emissions building materials supply chain. And there have been targets set out in the concrete and the steel and the aluminium industries as large emitters for Canada on how they are going to be further greening their activities. And so we're looking forward to working with industry and government to support that vision. So in the High Performance Buildings program, certainly at construction anyway, we've been focusing very heavily on the building side, so within the property line. and solutions in that space to reducing GHG emissions. So now we're tending to turn outwards now and thinking about how this is now a component of a much larger system, and how we need to think about this at a community level or a portfolio of buildings. And maybe there's a space here as well for breaking out of those sector divisions of residential or commercial or institutional, and start to think about all of these as one system at a community level. And there is work going on in energy modeling to make that decision making and trade-off better understood. So I think that the other thing around this is, in my opinion, is that there are a lot of research done in different pockets through different academic or industry organizations. And one of the things now is really to bring that research together and to be able to provide practitioners with strong decision-making tools that they can rely on, and that these decision-making tools are comprehensive enough to be able to consider the balance of low carbon, building resilience, and when to make decisions about sort of when to retrofit versus when not to, with those sorts of embodied carbon and resilience thoughts in mind now, which is more complicated than it was when we were just talking about energy efficiency. And so there's things like material banks and renting materials, maybe and using circular economy principles that we might want to be thinking about in the future. So next slide, please. So where I think we're going with this is that we have many levers to elicit change, but these levers need to be multidisciplinary and they need to be coordinated. And I think that that's coordination between government, industry, and academia. And I don't know who leads it. I think that's probably a slightly political question, but I think there needs to be an understanding and a win-win for industry and academia and government to make this happen quickly and efficiently. So the key levers that we see when we're sort of thinking about short-term and longer-term impact is looking at policy. What regulation do we need around procurement, codes and standards? How can we support technology and innovation through our colleges, through our industry research labs? And this could be in things like new materials or new types of fuel sources or new manufacturing processes. We also need to incorporate and embed information and capacity building to ensure we have the skilled people to make this change in the construction sector happen. And we need to provide financial incentives so that we can stimulate technology uptake and reward people who are aiming for greater reductions in emissions. And for me, as a psychologist, I have to say that I do think that trying to achieve a low carbon environment requires significant change management for the construction sector. Because really this is just a change management problem, because a lot of these technologies are already here. So how can we enable the construction sector and also society to change its values a bit, to say, well, I don't really need that big house with all that concrete to show that I've made it in life. Maybe there's another way to demonstrate success, and how can we as a community, how can we enable people to make greener choices that give them still a feeling of credibility and achievement in line with a capitalist society? And of course, I think one key part of this is to make this strategy equitable, inclusive, and diverse, because there are parts of the country and the community that require greater support than other sectors. So I think all of these things that I've mentioned above in this slide really need to think about that. Next slide, please. And just lastly, just thinking about opportunities for training in the new sector growth. This is an excellent slide, picture that I have stolen from the Carbon Leadership Forum. Thank you very much. So with the circular economy principle, there are many opportunities for training in new sector growth. So in the early stages of buildings life cycle, looking at how can we make this low emissions building material supply chain happen, with opportunities for fuel switching, and thinking more locally about sourcing materials and energy. How can we improve the design process so that people have different types of skills to make the reuse of materials easier? And how can we make the construction process less wasteful? So I think there's a really big opportunity there for thinking about that and training people to make that happen. On the use stage of things, there's a lot of new technologies for achieving energy efficiency still being developed. And there's a lot of people who are very familiar with older technologies or older approaches to building operation. So how can we retrofit people to make them more familiar and comfortable with new technologies and new software, as well as providing relevant training for people that are coming to this fresh. And in my view, the huge opportunity here in Canada is about the end of life stage of a building, and using those circular economies. How can we reuse and recycle used materials, and develop a sector around that space as well? Because I think we are, there's great work going on in the West Coast and some in the center and in the East, but there's a lot of learning and opportunity for new business and new skills in that space too. Next slide, please. So I haven't done a summary slide, so all I can say is I think that it's a collaborative approach, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Lexi, for those insights. Fascinating, a great scene setter for our panel. And if people have questions for Lexi, I'm going to encourage you to use the Q&A function, which you'll find at the bottom of your screens. Because now Lexi's finished speaking for a moment, she'll have a chance to directly address any questions that you may have for her in the Q&A function. So please do use that. We also have pre-submitted a number of questions for Lexi and the other panelists. So again, when we get to the panel discussion, the three-way panel discussion, after our three panelists have spoken, we have a lot of material to work with, and thank you to all of our participants who pre-submitted questions for our panelists. But if you have direct questions for Lexi, post them in the Q&A function, and Lexi will do her best, I'm sure, to answer those as the session progresses. And now I'm delighted to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Tony Cupido. Tony is a real pioneer of zero carbon building thinking and practice. And Tony is the kind of academic who brings a very, very practical hands-on approach to everything he does with Mohawk College students and with stakeholders from the local communities. So it is with great pleasure that I will now invite Tony to share some of his experience in this topic with the webinar. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the kind words, and welcome everyone. I just take a moment here to share my screen. I've got to get the presentation up and running, and I'll look forward to that. 1 second. There we go. I think that everyone should be seeing that. It's a pleasure here to talk to you a little bit about where our journey has been at Mohawk College, starting with the Joyce Center, an outstanding facility that we were very proud of. And it's just to give you a little bit of background information. It's a $50 million building that was opened in 2018. We're very proud to say it was the first dual certified, that's design and performance certified building under the Canada Green Building Council's zero carbon building program. This particular structure started off in 2016 as a net zero energy building, but slowly through the development of the program at the Canada Green Building Council, we were able to quickly target net zero as our, or zero carbon as our target for the building, and we were able to achieve that with a lot of success. I just want to touch on some of the highlights of what this building was about, and the fact that we were able to, for many of our professional designers, to have them have a paradigm shift of what they're thinking as in a conventional building. Part of any zero carbon building or net zero energy building typically involves a significant amount of solar photovoltaic arrays. And in our case here on our campus, the building is up in the top right-hand corner. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the top left-hand corner there, where we were able to have our building, and about a third of the panels that were required to actually fit the building with a nice support array that is a highlight feature of the design. But we needed other roof locations on our campus. Our buildings are typically all connected, and we were able to achieve that, and providing almost a half a megawatt of power for the building. And we were able to do so very cost effectively. And what I want to highlight is that as time goes on and our colleagues look at other structures and buildings that they're doing in the colleges, university sector, and others, there will be a growing demand for PV, growing demand for fabricating them, for the materials, and they're trying to get more efficient materials for these. And then there's the end of life of these particular panels that has to be considered for future work opportunities. Instead of just throwing them away, which has been an experience in the past decade or so, there's active involvement in recycling and repurposing these panels for different uses. This building as well had a much different mechanical electrical system, and particularly the mechanical system, which helped with some cost effectiveness for this particular building, because from a unit cost point of view, this building was no more expensive than any other institutional building across Canada. And we showed that, and we're very proud of that as well. This building, instead of the conventional boilers and chillers and other things that provide the heating and cooling for a building, we tried something different for us here in Canada, but very common in Japan and other countries in Europe. We used a heat pump system, and we used ground source geothermal wells that you can see there. There were 28 of them just in front of the adjacent building, and then connected into our new facility. So technically it's called a variable refrigerant flow geo-exchange system. It's very efficient and provided for a much smaller mechanical footprint in the mechanical room, mechanical penthouse, which helped considerably with cost. So these technologies were very cost effective, virtually low or no maintenance at all. And they were, here's an example of the heat pumps that are up in the mechanical room. You can see how clean they look, how efficient they are, and they're certainly easy to service and show. They're very student friendly to come up there and see how these systems run as well. And they're incredibly quiet compared to what you would typically experience. So these are the systems here that I think you're going to be seeing much more of, and more commercial, industrial, institutional, and even now more and more residential situations where you'll have heat pumps that help you with your cooling and your heating, and do so with a significant amount of reduced energy consumption and reduced greenhouse gases. The geothermal wells that were put out in front of the adjacent building there, it's interesting. They were done by a local company out of Caledonia, and it's a little bit of a messy job. You can see a little bit of muck and other things and big drill rigs. It took them about a month to put in 28 wells, so one roughly a day. And when I talked to the contractor, he said one of the biggest challenges they had was getting labor to help them out with this. It's a little bit of a messy job, and there was just a reluctance of individuals who just wanted to apply for this type of employment. It is seasonal in many ways. It's changing now because of the demand. But just so you know, there's a significant marketplace out there for work, for individuals who want to learn about this technology and apply it in different places through companies like GeoSource, which we worked with. Just so you know as well, we also provide all our domestic hot water heating through solar thermal panels, which are on the roof of the adjacent building facing south. And then you can see on your right-hand side there's a couple tanks inside that are preheated with this solution, hot solution that's produced by the sun, preheats the water, then it's used throughout the building for domestic purposes. We also did a considerable amount of rainwater harvesting here, so we do not use any municipal water for our toilet flushing and any irrigation we do, and that's a considerable savings to the environment as well. The other thing I'm proud to say about that Mohawk was a founding member of an organization or group, a collaboration in effect, called Workforce 2030. And it's the first coalition of its type, we believe, in Canada. And it was meant to help address the low carbon workforce and the development of that particular workforce. It's headed by the Canada Green Building Council. Mohawk was a founding member of this particular group. And recently we received funding from the Future Skills Center for about $1.2 million over a 2-year period. And this is a very important program because we're working with a lot of our partners to help ensure that we get the development of a workforce, particularly from marginalized communities impacted by the pandemic, and prioritizing and understanding the underrepresented groups in the building sector, especially women and racialized youth. There's a tremendous demand and pent-up need to help society develop the necessary skill sets to start working on construction. There's a tremendous amount of work ahead. Many of you have seen this, and this goes through all sectors, not only in the institutional sector, but the residential sector and the commercial and industrial sectors, which are changing rapidly. They need good, skilled labor, and we're here to help through this particular grant develop some of that at the earliest stages. You know, here's an important coalition here, and it's not just about one or two or two or three groups. It's a broad cross section of the industry, right from developers through to the professional groups, engineers and architects, my colleagues who are being challenged with helping with appropriate designs to help with reduced carbon. We started that initiative almost 5 years ago, and many of my colleagues are doing the same. General contractors now have a large inventory of groups now, or construction projects that they're working with. Building officials are becoming more and more sensitive to the need for reduced carbon. And we're getting a coalition here of government, colleges, and we're proud to be part of that, manufacturers and industry and unions. We're all here to help make this a particular reality. So as you're, you know, at the end of the day, we're leveraging a network of community organizations, educators, and experts. This project, Workforce 2030, will contribute to a low carbon skills innovation by evaluating, designing, and expanding training with low carbon content, by piloting and evaluating innovative upskilling delivery models, expanding pathways to resilient employment, a key piece to this, via employer and union channels, and by showing and sharing workforce development learning, a key piece that we're all part of here. It's just starting. We're at the earliest days of some of the curriculum development, but within the next few months, this will be rolling out into the community. We're proud to be having our city school program at Mohawk College be a big part of this. So we're excited about it, and it's all about learning skills for many individuals to get into the industry and get employed and make a meaningful contribution to the community and society in general. So that's my part, David, on this. And certainly I know there'll be questions coming up about some of the design issues, or maybe this initiative, Workforce 2030, and we'll be happy to answer those when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. That was very inspiring. So a great case study from Mohawk College, but then broadened out to the national scene and who needs to work together to generate the jobs and the skills and the training required if the country is going to deliver on its multi-billion-dollar aspirations around green buildings. Clearly, it's one thing putting a large number in a budget, a federal budget. It's another thing making that happen. And I think what you pointed to there is the multitude of stakeholders who have to come together, including the colleges, to ensure that we fill or meet that skills gap and deliver the workforce of the future. But the fact is the jobs should come as the investments go in. And I think it's great the work you're doing, and we're all very proud of that. So thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Again, you know, if you have direct questions for Tony, please put them in the Q&A function, and Tony will do his best to address them directly, or you can hold them for the panel discussion, your choice. But at this point, I'd now like to introduce Timo Cruz, And Timo is actually a graduate of Mohawk College, so this really is a Mohawk family affair on this panel. And it is great to have Timo. And as I mentioned, Ellis Don is well renowned for its commitment to sustainability in all of its projects that it does across the country. The mission of Ellis Don includes the importance of identifying solutions that build equitable smart cities of the future. Timo is also an entrepreneur, I'm pleased to say, because that's also a key part of the transition to a greener economy, that we need entrepreneurs to drive new ideas and new startups. And he was also responsible for launching something called Leafbox Concepts, a clean tech startup offering upcycled shipping containers for retail and event applications. So in Timo, you've got an all-rounder, someone who does his work through the auspices of Ellis Don, but also has a sense of what's needed for disruptive innovation to guide the country to a greener future. So Timo, it's great to have you on the panel. We're looking forward to hearing your remarks.
Great, thank you for the introduction, David. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah, very excited to speak more about the cutting edge construction technology and also the emerging skilled trade that is happening in this amazing sector that I'm a part of. And just a little quick introduction about myself. I'm currently an assistant project manager at Ellis Don's newest division, ED Modular, and very excited to show the merging between construction and manufacturing, and that's the goal that ED Modular has. And as mentioned, David, yes, my previous venture was upcycling shipping containers into off-grid retail and event uses, and we actually did a few events with Mohawk College. So there's a past picture of the shipping container in use pre-pandemic, of course. You can see we also had some solar PV panels as well, 1 kilowatt. So I'm also a firm believer in sustainable architecture and also emerging technologies. And the two photos on the right, you can just see the newest modular manufacturing plant that I joined 2 years ago. We're going to carry on here. With this first slide, we're actually going to try to break the stigma of modular manufacturing. A lot of people have a belief that modular is only shipping container homes. On the top left, you see an example of one. But really, it's really evolved into something that I will be touching on the next slide. And on the top right, you actually see some example of trailer homes that people think as well of what modular homes are or what were. And also on the bottom left, we have construction site offices, which is still very heavily used in the industry, but for more temporary measures. And as well on the bottom right, we have examples of in the post-war homes that were quickly built for soldiers returning back from abroad. So that's just a quick overview or trying to break the stigma of modular homes. All right, and next up, we're going to be speaking more about the different construction options and technologies that have been used, in the past centuries. So on the top left, we have conventional stick-built wood frame homes, which is still, a very large portion of the construction sector. And then in the top right, we have a new emerging trend as well, using more panelized construction methods, where you would prefabricate these wall panels off-site in a factory setting as well, and have them assembled piece by piece or wall by wall, and then also, still requiring a lot of work to be done still on site. And the bottom left one, you can actually see an example of more of my expertise is of modular construction. but you can still see the volume of the module is still rather empty. There's still a lot of interior finishes, electrical, plumbing, etc. to still do. And then on the bottom right is more of my lens that I will be providing some great insight about volumetric modular construction. And that's where 80 to 95% of all the materials or finishes or equipment and even furniture, as you can see, is fully completed in a factory setting. And my next slide will speak more about different modular examples in the world. It's very inspiring to see a lot of new buildings being built in this method. Top left is a wooden modular student residence in Netherlands. And then the top right, we have a California-based concrete modular building as well, an apartment. And then the bottom left, we have another student residence with some great massing of the modules, which is great to see to give some more landscape to the environment. And the bottom right is just another conceptual modular building. And you can see it has some great design features. So that's just a quick overview as well of the modular building design and what is achievable. And my next slide will be covering more about the specific benefits of modular construction. And the first one is due to the efficiency of overlapping your on-site services, such as your foundation work and getting the site ready for the modules, while concurrently you are building your modules off-site and in a controlled factory setting, you are able to quickly reduce project life cycle, and sometimes significantly from 20 to 35% of schedule reduction, which is great for clients and developers, and to also help solve the housing crisis, as there is a large backlog of either affordable homes or long-term care homes as well. To help get into market as fast as possible is one of my daily motivators to get up in the morning. And the second main feature is reliable quality. We can really enhance the interior and exterior finishes of a building with car manufacturing like processes, and we also have different stations that cover different activities and that get checked off and before it does leave the factory. So we have a high QA/QC focus as well. And the third one, I'd like to speak a little bit more about the less waste as well, due to the entire module is 3D designed, so we are able to take off very accurate material usages that we need, so we don't overconsume. So we're very conscious about making sure that we have very efficient material that is used in the modular in the module application. And then last one, we have very efficient labor and also the upskilling of trade workers that is happening in terms of reaching those schedules and those targets that we have to complete a building. We have the labor that is, they essentially work in teams and groups and complete different activities such as, plumbing work or HVAC work and different types of skilled trade activities per station. So it's really great to see, and also work with a very talented skilled trade team at ED Modular. And now this is just an aerial view of the 300,000 square foot Ellison's manufacturing facility, where I actually go into work every day and deemed essential construction, working on some very exciting projects. In quick overview, we have 7 module assembly lines and over 200 plus skilled trade workers working out of this facility to help, currently complete a Infrastructure Ontario project and also a federal RCMP project. And this just kind of gives you the mass scale of the facility and where a lot of the magic happens in creating these modules. Next up, we'll be discussing more about the two different areas. One is the offline production of the facility, which is more of automated machinery and robotics, which actually helps expedite and improve processes to meet those target dates. You can run these machinery and robotics essentially 24/7 with the right trained technicians and operators, and that's where I think a lot of the opportunities in the sector will be coming out of, is to train and upskilling the workers to to help coordinate and manage these very efficient robotics. And then the bottom two, we actually have some more conventional skilled trades. You can see at the bottom right, we have a nice aerial shot of almost a whole skilled trade team there, and one of our first completed modules there, and it's shrink wrapped. And then in the bottom left, we have the different modules going from station to station, completing certain activities, and that's where we see a large employee kind of based workers working in those different stations, for example, drywall or millwork or electrical, and there's still a big opportunity to join the team as well. And on that last note, we are still hiring over 20 plus skilled trades. So if there's anyone listening, or if you have colleagues that are looking for work and to upskill their current job, more than happy to provide some insights into this emerging sector, and hopefully that help cover a good insight into how modular manufacturing can help offset our greenhouse gas emissions as well. Yeah.
Timo, that was fabulous, a real fascinating insight into the world of modular. And so thank you for that. And also, bringing it back to the question of opportunity. And your pitch there at the very end for people to get in touch with you says it all. I think that there is a huge opportunity in terms of future employment, and also a huge contribution to be made to Canada's progression towards a zero carbon economy by 2050, if we get this right. So thank you, Timo. Now I see that there's been a number of inputs in the Q&A function, so I'm just going to review those very quickly. Marcel Lavoie obviously needs to talk to you directly, Timo, offline, but Marcel has also asked the question, have you looked into code adherence for modular construction? And I'll add a rider to that, because one of our founding partners in C2R2, the Cégep de Rimouski, is a big player in the world of wood construction. You mentioned wood in your modular options. So can you tell us something about code adherence and also the steel versus wood versus other materials issues? Because that also relates to one of the questions that came in from our participants in advance, which relates to, what do we do in terms of ensuring from a life cycle perspective that modular actually is better. So Timo, what do you think about those questions?
Yeah, thanks for putting me in the hot seat first. That's fine. Really have a big passion about modular and the different options available in the market. And for the first question about code adherence, we actually have two different CSA certifications or governing bodies that do their due diligence, and we also complete our yearly, how do you say it? Also adherence as well to the code. So yes, we are able to meet to different municipalities' codes due to our different CSA certifications. So hopefully that helps explain that one. And then Dave, I believe there's a second question about the differences between wood and concrete and steel. Is that right?
Yeah, and a number of questions have come in, both in the Q&A function and in advance. For example, Cheryl Friars says, with the cost of a wood stud, $2 before COVID and now $6 to $10, how does modular play to that kind of price shift, and how do you make the call really on wood versus steel versus other materials when you're acting as a proponent for modular design and construction?
Right. Well, first, we are a manufacturer and supplier, so it really depends on the client's need and also the municipality's acceptance of different, construction structure. For example, wood, you're limited to 6 stories, and for example, steel, you can go a lot higher, and also for fire rating. So there's a lot of different factors that you have to consider. And not only considering the cost of one particular material, but more of a municipality and also a developer's optimal building height that they would also want to achieve in their development. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, it does, Timo, and so there's a good segue here for Lexi, because again, one of the questions that came in advance was looking at it's obviously the embodied carbon as well as the operation and maintenance of the building once it's up and running. So the question that was submitted in advance was this: how much consideration is given to using low carbon building materials to reduce the embodied carbon in the buildings? If this is a consideration, what tools do you use to identify low carbon materials? Do you quantify the embodied carbon, e.g. the whole building life cycle assessment? So I'm assuming this is something that your group in NRC is very focused on, but perhaps you can tell us a little bit about how you make the call, again, between different materials, the embodied carbon, and what tools and techniques you use to advise the industry on that score.
Yeah, so we've worked very much on energy efficiency, like I said in the presentation, and the research around embodied carbon and how to sort of standardize the methods and things like that has really been done in the university setting. And so we at NRC are now thinking, how do we take all this science and turn it into things, de-risk it, make it operational, and enable the industry to use these principles. So we're kind of still developing a lot of our capacity there. However, I do think it's something that people are going to be giving a lot more consideration to now, and certainly within the code structure, we're starting to think about how we need to think about embodied carbon in the National Building Code and the NECB. We're also looking at how we can support the government to procure using embodied carbon protocols as well. But one of the things I did want to mention here is that to enable people to make good decisions around embodied carbon, you need to have a lot of communication between in the design process and between the manufacturers, so that they can understand how much carbon actually is in those building materials. And at NRC, we need to talk about level playing fields. And so what we really want to do is make sure that every industry is sort of given a fair space to work compared to all the others. So we're really looking to work with industry to find out using standardized methods how much carbon there is in each of the building materials, put that in a database, where people can reference it and then start to work with environmental product declarations and with using the LCA process to really start to come up with very rigorous, trustworthy numbers that industry can use to start to sort of label or understand the relative impacts on greenhouse gas emissions and carbon that their choices through the construction design process are actually making. And as we talk about circular economy, that's really going to start changing those models more as well. So to answer the question directly, there's a huge amount going into considering low carbon. And I think that consideration is at the research end, it's at the operational end, and it's also very much in industry and code as well. So it's coming. We just need to work out how to coordinate it.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Lexi. And it does raise some interesting public policy questions and some questions around how public agencies, governments, municipalities procure their buildings. And I'm wondering, it may sound heretical to pose this in a seminar hosted by Mohawk College in Hamilton, but do you see wood taking more market share as municipalities and others take into account the kind of analyses you're doing? Will wood be displacing steel and cement in the future to a certain extent?
I think it depends on your time frame. Ultimately, what we want to do is find materials that are the lowest carbon as soon as possible. And we need to support our existing industries to make them as energy efficient as they can. And there are many, many ways to support the present high emitters to enable them to be much lower carbon. And so I think it then starts to go into the conversation about carbon sequestration, fuel switching, and making those manufacturing processes more efficient already. And I was very pleased to see what Tony was demonstrating with his project, with the energy efficiency and how they had used geothermal there in a building. Because I think the other thing, of course, is that when we talk about embodied carbon, we're not just talking about the materials, we're talking about the usage of the energy through the life cycle of a building too. So I think you can attack different ways.
David, I think I can.
Excellent. Yeah, I saw, Tony, you were going to come in there, so please go ahead.
David, I think I can quickly add to what Lexi was saying there. There's no question that concrete and steel are two of the largest embodied carbon culprits, if you want to call them that, for most buildings here, particularly sizable ones. There's a lot of activity going on in the concrete industry that is starting to produce some low carbon or zero carbon concrete. There's at least one or two firms that are leading the industry out there in the country, and there's plenty of research going on. Steel is a challenge. There's no question about that. I think the industry is certainly aware of it. They're working on it, but I think they will be lagging when compared to other industries simply because of the logistics of how they make steel and some of the challenges that will go with trying to change their processes. In fact, all the structural steel for our building in Hamilton, none of it came from Canada. We just don't make it here in this country anymore. We're very fortunate to get it reasonably close in the US, but that is a challenge industry-wide. But as Lexi mentioned, we do not use natural gas in our facilities, save and except the emergency generator, which is only tested once in a while. But the lack of use of natural gas helps with all this. And I think the operational piece we've got figured out. We are not a net emitter of carbon. We're a net sink for carbon in this particular building over the life cycle of it. So we have to think on a broader perspective, but changes will happen in that industry with embodied carbon, but it may take a little bit of time.
Excellent. Thank you for those insights, Tony. Again, based on your practical experience and your local geographical knowledge, steel does have it all to do, for sure, as does concrete. And it'll be interesting to see how successful they are in decarbonising their industries the next few years. A couple more comments in on the Q&A function. Marcel Lavoie, who obviously is a colleague of Lexi's, says that if anyone wants more information about Lexi's presentation and her program, please direct them directly to him, marcel.lavoie@nrc.cnrc.gc.ca. Thank you for that, Marcel. We also have a request for Lexi's email address in the Q&A function. So I think that was on Lexi's presentation. So the best way to get that would be to rewatch the presentation when it's posted in the next day or so, and you'll find Lexi's email address there. And then there was a question for Tony about training, and all three of our presenters may well have a perspective on this one in terms of how this may play out in the future. But this has come in specifically for Tony. What proportion of new training do you see Mohawk providing for new training skilled trades, upskilling skilled trades, perhaps micro-credentials and technological training? How do you see that playing out at Mohawk and perhaps across the sector?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll answer it by this. I would say most post-secondary institutions, particularly in the college sector, which impacts trades mostly, but certainly even in universities where the professional sector is important here, but there is a need for this. Just starting with the operation, the significant training of our own staff, just to operate for them, new equipment. It's not overly complex, quite frankly. I believe they're pleased with the technology and the lack of need for ongoing maintenance and checks. It's pretty self-sustaining in that way. But there is a significant need for upskilling. That's why Mohawk is very proud to be part of Workforce 2030. We are part of a larger group trying to start this initiative with upskilling of the individuals we were talking about. And you start by looking at, and I know there was a question about micro-credentialing, and people ask, well, what is that? Well, it's the ability to have a particular recognition for a skill, not a broader perspective of a curriculum, but a particular skill that one can achieve and get recognition for. You know, my analogy is I'm showing my age here, but when I was a Boy Scout, you got a little badge on your arm here that showed that you could make a campfire or use an axe safely or do some things, and you got credit for pitch a tent. So you got credit for that. And just as, you know, again, moving it forward into this area about micro-credentialing, there are many skills that you can achieve by simply learning about the process and gaining that credentialing, which helps with recognition for that individual for future employment. So we're starting that process with our city school. I suspect most colleges across the country are revising their curriculum to move forward with some additional components related to this. I've been a critic of the length of time it takes to change curriculum in this country and maybe in this province, and I think everyone can acknowledge that. We're doing a good job of it. It needs to happen a little more rapidly, but we're starting here at Mohawk, and I know many of our colleagues across the province are doing the same thing.
Fantastic. And so now, Lexi wants to add something to what Tony just said.
Yeah, I have to say, Tony, that before coming on the call here, I was looking through the Mohawk website at all the courses that are available. And I was thinking to myself, as a psychologist working in the sort of the research with the engineering industry, it's super helpful to be able to sort of understand other people's terminology and to understand their different perspectives. And I think this is one of the things that I really think is quite critical in energy efficiency, is that it is yes, people know their skills very, very well, but we have to work in multidisciplinary teams these days, and you need to be able to speak and understand people's perspectives. And I think these sort of smaller courses that people can do are super helpful for just giving people a taste of what the other person that they're talking to, what their experience is and what their background is. And you come up with a much rounder product and solution that way, I think, as well. So I want to just say that. The other thing as well, just to whilst I've got the floor, is that I think that certainly with the energy efficiency work that we've been doing, we found that people are developing and designing these wonderful buildings, but unless the operators know how to actually operate the buildings well, you don't achieve the target energy efficiency that you have in the design. So I think it's really, really critical that you have skilled operators that know how to work the technology to the best that it's been designed to.
Fantastic, thanks, Lexi. I now want to shift gear a little bit to think about the building industry, and you're all very involved with the building industry and the sector as a whole. One of the questions that came in from participants in advance was, what are the drivers for that industry? So what's actually going on out there in terms of government policy, procurement policy, and so on, that's making people take these issues seriously these days? And is it enough? So, what are the drivers, and are they strong enough? Are the signals strong enough for the rapid decarbonisation of the building sector that we need to see? So maybe I'll go to Timo first on that one, as you're very embedded in the industry.
Yeah, well, I guess kind of a cool fact that I read in one of my books recently was that, cement and steel make up almost 10% of our global GHGs, right? And annually we have 51 gigatons of GHGs, right? So that's a lot of greenhouse gases in those two materials alone. And I think from my perspective, in terms of the modules that I help produce at the plant, is that it is mainly steel. It is at least Canadian made, which is great to have to support the local economy. But yeah, I believe how Tony explained it before, was the actual process of making steel is very embedded, within that industry. And I think changing that, I think will take a lot more research and development, and even maybe some arm wrestling as well to make it change, for the better, in terms of reducing the exact, GHGs that we are producing from steel. But I believe the way forward would be also having those plants mainly run off renewable power as well, because there is also electricity that's annually that my plant uses, that could be offset with renewables. Now we do have some kilowatts of renewables on our roof, but I feel like there should also be an emphasis on the overall process, from the manufacturing to the operations and logistics portion of producing buildings, which I think it's a big elephant in the room, because transportation and ongoing operation of a building is very significantly less than the overall production of these buildings. So those are just my kind of quick insights, and hopefully that explained a bit about that.
And I'll come back to you, Timo, in a moment to ask you how optimistic you are that these drivers are strong enough. I think it was Suyash in the Q&A function right at the beginning who said, are we really going to make it as a country to net zero at 2050? And I saw Tony put in a very optimistic response. Thank you, Tony. But I'll come back to you in a moment, Timo, and ask you about your level of optimism about this sector. But maybe Lexi and Tony, or Tony and Lexi, what are the drivers that you're seeing, and are they strong enough?
Yeah, I'll jump in. What we're seeing clearly in the industry is that some individual cities and states and provinces are taking the leadership by setting aggressive energy building targets that current owners and developers must comply with, and in many cases very rapidly. So New York City, New York State, Washington, DC, large cities, City of Toronto and Vancouver have their own what they call step code requirements. So large entities are setting these benchmarks that have to be complied with, and that is setting the tone in many ways. I think the federally we could do a little bit more with setting some aggressive targets. We're complying, or we have the global target of greenhouse gas reduction, but as you drill down with codes and other requirements, there's more needed. But we're seeing some leadership from many cities, and I think that is helping the industry move forward. I think and there'll be penalties if you don't comply. There's no other way to put that. And these cities have made it clear that there'll be fines in many ways, particularly in the States. So we're seeing the global, because I'm a strong advocate of governance and good policy to help get us through this particular challenge of greenhouse gas reduction targets. And it looks like the US, which often has been criticized for maybe not doing as much as they could, individually, cities and states, and now certainly in provinces in Canada, are taking that leadership role individually and moving forward very rapidly.
Thank you, Tony. And Lexi, do you have a sense of whether or not the policy drivers and other drivers are coming together now? I appreciate you're a public servant, so you can't make political comments, but your technical insights on this question would be much appreciated. And although we may not have Mr. Trudeau registered personally on this webinar, we do know that a number of ministers and their staffs are taking very seriously what C2R2 is doing. So please tell us whatever you can about the direction of public policy in Canada on improved standards, improved requirements, improved drivers for green building.
Yeah, so it is a massive topic, David, and maybe I can take off my policy hat and put on my psychology hat as a research scientist, because the way I look at it is that the drivers are I see that I tend to go to a technology adoption model when I think about this type of thing. So what is it that motivates the early adopters to take on new technologies and new approaches? How do we then get sort of the early majority to take on? They're the ones that the technology's been de-risked with the early adopters, and they're really interested in now trying it out and scaling it up in their buildings or their communities. And then you've got the codes that pull in the people that are a bit resistant or cautious to change, and that's the job of the codes there. Ironically, Tony said he's very much in form of governance. I tend to go a bit more sort of Wild West in my thinking, and I really want industry to see the opportunity here and for them to be inspired to make these changes because they think these are the right things to do, because there's money to be made in it, and there's a really good export market for some of the stuff that we're doing. And so I think that what I would like to do is I would like to use people that do change management and we take on the psychologists and we say, look, you know about changing organizations, you know about changing social structures. How can we stimulate industry so that they are driving this change in the right direction? Because they're going to be able to do it much faster than the government is going to with some of its policies. And I think to support that, you need to provide good incentives from government. So maybe I just got fired, but I hope not.
No, I think everyone will be with you on that one, no problem. We're going to, again, move to a different topic in a second, but Timo, I did want to give you a chance to answer this question again about your level of optimism. I mean, do you see this sector achieving net zero by 2050 with the current drivers in play, or does something else have to happen to move the industry and hear what we say, what Lexi just said about how we improve incentives and knowledge and get industry motivated? But at the end of the day, what are you seeing, and is it enough?
Right. Well, I think there's probably three things I would want to try to cover and explain why my optimistic is medium to high, which it could be higher. As a new professional to the sector, I am seeing these decade kind of long ways of doing things and making things, and I think one is the the green premiums to specific alternative green construction materials, or different types of new technologies such as geothermal or PV arrays as well. Even though the cost of those are still going down, which is great to see. I think it's also the adoption of those and just trying to reduce that green premium, because it should be a no-brainer to choosing these alternative ways of construction or of producing energy for your building. And then second, I think there should also be a bigger focus on the R&D effort to find new technologies, because the current technology is not enough to offset the 51 gigatons of GHGs annually. I still think there is a big unbalance of still emission related to coal or natural gas or other harmful ways of producing energy. That's kind of like the emerging technologies should be a bigger, I think, also, let's say, a bigger career path, and more startups, one from similar to what I did before, and but in a more building focused way. And then three, I think it should be the overall mindset of society as well, in terms of if there is a green premium, then why not adopt or choose that green premium and pay that little extra, knowing that there is a better way to build. And I think if you take those three things in consideration, and the stars align, I definitely think we are able to hit zero carbon. It should be a good target, and what kind of fires me up in the day is to help support that mission.
Fantastic. That's a good mission to be fired up by. And of course, a carbon price of a couple of $100 a ton would probably help a little. I'm now going to shift gear slightly. We have 3 or 4 minutes left, so I'll ask all of our panelists to be succinct in their responses. But we've spoken a lot about new build, new materials and so on. And we've talked rather less about energy efficiency and retrofits, which of course is again a big part of this puzzle. And so question directly for Lexi, but again, I'm going to invite all of our panelists to address it in general terms. Rachel says, I'm curious about the residential sector homeowners in green retrofitting. How effective is, or is it anticipated for the Canada Greener Home Grant to engage homeowners in retrofitting? Is more to be done, or is more being done to further engage this sector? So perhaps we'll start with Lexi, but again, we'll get Timo and Tony to have their thoughts about what's happening in the retrofitting space and what more should be happening. But Lexi, perhaps we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the program is a really good start. I think it is trying to. I think it has 2 functions. It's obviously trying to incentivize, and I said that was important earlier. I think it's also raising awareness of homeowners that they can do something to their property, and that some of these changes don't, well, this particular program is going for larger changes, but there are a lot of changes you can make that are small, like caulking or windproof weather stripping and things like that, that you can do to really improve the energy efficiency and the demand for energy for heating and cooling. So I think while the program is targeting bigger changes in technology like insulation and windows and things like that, I think it raises that awareness, and I think that's very important. And I will be very succinct to my last comment. I do think with the optimization of the energy grid, it's even more critical now that homeowners realize the opportunity they have to generate, dispatch, and use energy as part of a system, and they need to take more responsibility for understanding that system. So I'll stop there.
Excellent. And in 30 seconds or less, Tony and Timo, your thoughts on energy efficiency and retrofits?
Yeah, I think the governments, I know, are trying with some incentives, but I think they need to be far more aggressive. We should set some goals that can easily be achieved, whether it's changing your lighting to LED lighting in most homes. That can easily be done by the end of the year. The costs have come way down. But we'd start provincially. I know we did well in Ontario with reducing or eliminating coal as the basis for electrical generation. We need to do that across the country to help, and then set some aggressive targets for and standards for new construction that I think will go a long way, and then supplement that with some renewal strategies that can easily be done by the typical homeowner.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tony. And Timo, last word to you.
Yeah, I would say that I guess it would start from the first principles of design of a home, or any building. For that fact, I think the way the building envelope is designed, I think that's actually where if there is a new build, that's where it should be started. And if it's an existing build, there's obviously some ways to help offset your emissions as well. But I still think that there is it comes back to the way your building was, your home was designed as well. I think there is a lot of still room for improvement. I think it's just a start as well for the homeowner to start thinking about it, because that program, what I've been reading, is not perfect. There's still a lot of upfront fees and energy studies that you have to complete before you are given the grant. So I still think there's a lot of room for improvement as well.
Thank you, Timo. That was a great response and a bit of a nudge on the question of government leadership, the importance of getting these programs right. Sadly, we're now out of time, but I hope that all of our participants and our panelists and our support teams have got as much out of this webinar as I have. It's been fascinating. So I want to thank, in particular, our three panelists for their wisdom and insights, and we'll give them a virtual round of applause for great contributions. I want to again thank the team behind all of this. So that's Adrienne, Amy, Sam, and Joanne, and of course our wonderful sign language experts, Sarah and Erin. Thank you again. Big round of applause to everyone who made this happen. This is the third in the webinar series, as I mentioned at the beginning. There will be more webinars offered by Canadian Colleges for Resilient Recovery in the fall. So we would ask you all to stay tuned for those. They'll all be led by one of our wonderful founding partners at C2R2, and we'll be covering everything you could possibly want to know about greening the economy, resilient recovery, and the role that colleges and CEGEPs and polytechs and institutes can play in that through demonstration projects, through R&D with local businesses and industries, and of course through their primary mission, which is training and education, but in a flexible, micro-credentialed and highly accessible way. So with that, I'd like to draw things to a close. Thank you everyone who attended. Thank you to our panelists again, and to everyone who made this happen. And we look forward to seeing you at future webinars hosted by C2R2. Thanks again.